Welcome back, everyone. We are excited to be in Las Vegas today.
Sin City, right? Yeah.
And we're here with Sean Wagner, who has done a variety of different types of businesses, in particular looking at digital marketing, looking at apparel marketing. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the nuances of this, how things work when they don't work, and what kinds of things we can learn about it. So I'm going to turn it to you to give your own bio.
Wow, that's a scary thing to give me. So, I guess the long and short of it is I started, my grandmother raised me, and she was an entrepreneur. And that was a really big deal. And so I grew up in Maryland. And so she started taking care of me when I was around 8. So you're talking early 80s.
Yeah.
And so she was a single woman, single grandmother, raising an 8-year-old at the time in a man's world in real estate and mortgage lending. And she became the head of the Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors, as well as the Women's Council. And so She was really an amazing businesswoman. But I was that latchkey kid. So, I got into a lot of trouble, obviously, as a latchkey kid. Not because she was the old grandmother that didn't know better, because she was the grandmother that left at 7 in the morning and got home at 10 p.m. and I was raised by babysitters.
Wow.
But I saw a lot of her entrepreneurial spirit and mindset that really kind of directed the way I was headed with my world in business. So I started, as a matter of fact, she got me the job that kind of started me in marketing. I started working for MBNA America Bank in 1993. Came home from my freshman year of college and needed a summer job.
Right.
And she's like, oh, there's this place over in Towson. And I don't know, but they pay well. That's all I got from her, right? And so I go in not knowing what I was doing and fill out an application with my friend Greg.
Oh,
and
that's when you met Greg.
No, I'd known Greg since fourth grade.
Oh, he went with you.
But
I got it.
He needed a job.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I don't know, there's this thing that pays well. I think back then, you're probably talking back in the days when...
It should have been $4.25 an hour.
$4.25, I think, was paying like $9. Mm-hmm. So we're like, oh, yeah, we got to go check this out.
Yeah, that's
right, $9.
Yeah.
So we go check it out, and it was telemarketing for MBNA America Bank for credit cards. So we signed up, and next thing you know, I became really good there. And they offered me to come back at any point. But my marketing freshman year had been psychology until I had the world's most boring professor that bored the heck, I don't know what we can say, I have a bad mouth, until bored the heck out of me. And I then switched to business. And so I went into business as my major, international marketing. And I'll say this too, I don't believe college is worth a whole lot for that kind of thing. If you're a doctor, mathematician, scientist, I think college is critical because there is a major learning component for fact. Whereas business has so much to do about who you know, what you know, and how you put that together.
Yeah.
So a lot of deals can be done on the golf course versus, sitting behind a desk.
But this is where we're going. We're going to the point where it's not going to be just, did you take this course?
Right.
It's, did you learn how to play golf?
Yeah.
Did you learn how to eat at the nice restaurant?
Yeah.
Do you know your top wines? Do you?
Yeah, right.
These are the things that I call them game rules.
Yeah.
And when we say, oh, we're going to give everybody free education, we're going to give equity of access to education, I said, you're not educating people on how to actually do the job.
Right.
All you're doing is giving them access to information.
Right.
Not enough, and business is a great example.
You can find so many people in business that, went to Wharton or wherever else but they can't hold a conversation.
Right.
So it's like, okay, what good is that? Whereas I was a little hustler, and my grandmother made me talk. She would have her wine and cheese parties with her mom. So I was 10 years old, and grandmother's raising me, and she would always have, you got to think, 10 years old, that's 1984. Don't hold that against me. I feel old now. So she'd have her wine and cheese parties, and she would make me go get dressed up to be like the little entertainment. And she would make me, she would tell me what we're going to do for wine. You need to go introduce yourself to every person here and talk to them and ask them a few key questions. And I would cry and be the world's little, biggest brat and blah, blah, blah. But I look back to that. She used to also make me answer the phone at the home. But all these things made me a very good conversationalist and made me have, I can meet a stranger and within minutes I feel like we were lifelong best friends.
Yeah.
So, but that's accredited to her. If I would have had my way, I would have been sitting in the basement playing Nintendo and being like, yeah, screw you, I don't want to talk to anybody. But, the ability to have conversations and to hustle and to put those together with whatever knowledge or skill set you have, I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's what being an entrepreneur is all about. You can go to Wharton and be the world's, best knowledge base for business theory.
Well, I mean, we need those people too, right? We just need to know which one of these people are you, right? And we don't do a good job of helping people make those decisions.
No.
I have a tagline in one of my ads or something that said, there's a wonderful thing about having options, but the negative is you have to choose.
Right.
And when we lived a long time ago, and it was like, your grandfather was a blacksmith, your dad was a blacksmith, guess what, buddy, you're a blacksmith. Yeah. You didn't have this internal conflict of like, what is the definition of success? Who am I going to be? And now you have so many decisions. You have to pick your gender. You have to pick your what you're going to do for school, which classes you're going to take, who are you going to be with, what are you going to spend your time doing, where are you going to go, where are you going to live, who are you going to live with, what's your first. I mean, the list is so long.
Only getting longer.
And so, as a psychologist, I'm like, remember when we're 2 and we tell kids, you can use the restroom first or brush your teeth first, but you're doing both. Right. There's a reason we only give people 2 choices.
Give them too many choices.
That's right, and there is an element of too many choices.
Sure.
But on the other hand, what we've done is we've opened this option list, and then we've given nobody any tools on how to pick. Yeah. And so I would love to see.
I mean, you can be anything you want to be, but nobody's helping you figure out what it is you could be and good at, and which direction you head when you think you want.
Yeah. Well, and if we have everybody aiming towards the same thing, then aren't we just creating an assembly line of the same people?
Well, and then how's that play in today's world where everybody gets a trophy? You tell me.
Trophies are fun. I don't know. I threw my children's out. I'm sorry.
But I'm saying, right, so if you're directing everybody down the same path, you're doing the same thing by telling everybody that there's no competition when you give everybody a trophy in today's world. Yeah, so which is a lie. It's a horrible lie.
It's a terrible lie. I remember when Chris was trying to decide, does he do C-suite or sales? And I kept saying, you do so well at sales and you enjoy it. Why don't you do that? But in his head, he had always been told the C-suite was the goal. Right. And so there was turmoil in figuring it out instead of, these are the options available to you. Who are you?
Right. Well, I mean, it's that whole thing, like, the family wants you to be a doctor or a lawyer, and if you're not, they disown you, but then you become the world's best entrepreneur at food trucks. But you have to earn they don't care how much success you have with food trucks because you're not a doctor or a lawyer. Yeah. So, I mean, I went to school for business, and then I came back to MBNA, and I transferred. I started in Colorado, and then I transferred to Towson, and that's when Chris and I got together. Yeah. And so I'm over at Towson, and I'm still doing my business degree while then went back to MBNA and started working part-time, and then was offered to apply for their summer intern program, which back in '95 was 2,500 people apply, and they accepted 6. Wow. From around the world. Because they had France, they had the UK, they had a couple of, MBNA was the largest.
So what was different about you? What is it that if somebody could capture, even if they can't become as talented as you are, what are the traits or the skill sets that you had that made you, that's a huge pool.
It's a massive pool.
And I'm assuming we're looking at paper. So what am I looking at?
Paper, but then you had your in-person interviews. And I dominated every in-person interview I did at MBNA the whole time. So I was like I know it sounds so horrible, but I was like the most highly promoted person in the Maryland branch for the 4 years I was there.
But why?
And again, I attribute it to my grandmother. Being able to hold a conversation and captivate people is a huge thing. So same thing happens in dating, right? What is your success ratio in dating? And how do you have that success ratio? Right? So people can just go.
Start calculating this part.
Sports, you have a playbook. Dating, you have a playbook. Life, you should have a playbook. Okay. Right? So in dating, I know that my ratio is going to be about 90% success. Okay. If I've done my filters right, and by the time I go out on a date, I already filtered right. I led the direction in the way I wanted to go. I go to the right spot, and I know I'm a good conversationalist that'll make somebody laugh. So if you have good ambiance and you're in a nice place, 90% success ratio. Right, so you take that back to an interview.
So these are all our variables of a good date plan. Okay,
let's think about it, right? It's no different than an interview. You're selling, right? So in an interview, and I remember one of these very specifically, I had to interview with 2 managers that they both needed an assistant manager, but they were interviewing together the pool of applicants. And when they finished my interview, both of them ran out to go talk to the VP of the thing to see which one could get me. And I'm not kidding, they like forced each other, like, who's gonna get out the door first? I had them laughing and like I had them intrigued. But here's the tricky thing. How do you teach that? So my grandmother taught me to talk to people at 10 years old and not be scared to talk to people. So I get the gift of gab from her. But if you have somebody who's whatever age, in their 20s or 30s, that has been a hermit their whole life and they're scared to talk, how do you actually teach that? So I mean, you can teach things.
Yeah.
But somebody has, like, nobody believes that I'm an introvert. I'm classic introvert.
Yeah.
But I taught myself how to be extrovert.
Yeah.
Any given night, I'd rather be at home, not talking to a single person, watching TV or on the computer.
I've been trying to convince people of that about me, but they don't always believe me.
That's my thing.
Right, because
Same.
I too talk all the time, but as soon as I get to my truck, I do nothing. I'm like
call it
flat.
on and off.
Yeah, it's on and off. Yeah.
So like, the apparel business, the first 2.5 years, I did somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 events. And that means going to an event, setting up, and then selling and meeting people for anywhere between 8 to 15 hours.
So
and you
walk
have to
me
imagine
through how
being
you
on.
walk us through how you decide to take on a business like this, because there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of investment.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right, and then you try to go do these events.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to know the truth about that answer, it's that I had more money than brains.
Okay.
So my online business that I had for at that point, this would be, so I mean, you're talking 15 years.
Okay.
I had my online businesses,
right.
my data and lead generation businesses. They were kind of on autopilot, making good money, and I had gotten involved in athletics, CrossFit.
Okay. Right.
And one of my friends had the idea, who got me into that, said we should start an apparel company. Just have fun with it. And when you have available capital to burn, like, oh, let's do that. But we never did. He moved back to Vegas, ironically, and it was just that idea, we should do this. And nothing ever came of it. But at the time, I had told my girlfriend, like 6 months later, I'm like, wouldn't mind doing an apparel company. And ironically, I had just done apparel for my online businesses, for my marketing companies.
Right.
Just to have it at our conventions and that sort of thing. So I kind of got like a little taste of what it would be like to, I could make something look cool. So I thought I knew a little bit about, apparel. And so I had this idea. Her and I go to, what at the time was a massive thing in Southern California, the CrossFit Games. And we're walking around Vendor Village. And as we're walking around, she's like, God, look at all the junk here. You could do so much better. You should do your idea. And I had time and I had money and passion, right? So that's where it's tricky, because for a lot of people to start a business, especially apparel, because it was the complete opposite of having an online marketing company.
Yeah.
Online, I had no brick and mortar, I had no inventory, I had, my staff was remote. Versus you flip that to now I need to have on-hand apparel,
right,
inventory, and I need to go to events, and I need to sell, and I need to have a warehouse, and so I started my garage. But the trick of that was, right, I had the money to burn at the time, and I knew that I would probably lose for the first year, but I figured, everybody thinks they got the perfect idea. Well, if this theory holds true, if I get enough people wearing our product, I'll have walking, talking billboards that come back and buy, and then knew that people in that space were also CrossFitters, were also gymnasts and racquetball players and rugby players and football players and water skiers and mountain climbers and blah, blah. So that was my theory, but to get it started, it was purely passion. So I had the fortune, I was fortunate enough to have already had a business for 15 years that afforded me the luxury to put money and some time into a concept. But the average person doesn't have that.
Well, so then maybe we should back up.
Okay.
How did you do the digital marketing to get you?
Oh, well, that's a different story. So,
because this is an area people really don't understand, right? I mean, this is This is a space that for the generation over the age of 60, 65, it's...
Oh, well, yeah, you just said it. How do you make money on Facebook?
Right. So there's nothing tangible to it.
No.
There isn't entirely even a concept. I will admit to being largely baffled myself, having now gone around the country, gone on this journey. I understand things like, okay, I need a lot of social media accounts.
Yeah.
Roger that. We need to make sure that we're doing something that's interesting, and we need to make sure that we have something that comes of it, like we're heading somewhere. But it takes time, and it takes feedback, and it takes money.
Yeah.
And that, in my mind, is a very linear thought process that I just laid out.
Sure.
Which I don't think is the right thought process.
Well, I mean, so the way I got into the digital world, I was part of the Wild West crew in 1999.
Yeah.
So, and ironically, if you want to know how far back this actually goes, it starts when I lived with Chris. Because I was taking marketing classes in college, had my computer that my grandmother gave me, which back in, I think we lived together around 96, if I'm correct. I think it was around 96.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about like a big block of a computer that did nothing. I mean, the best part of that computer was that I could play solitaire. But you know, that's what you wrote your papers on versus a computer or versus a typewriter. So I had a class that we had to, two different classes you had to create a fictional company. And those, again, talking 96, so let that sink in. And I got A's on both these papers. One was an online cigar store. And back in the 90s, cigars were massive. Cigar Aficionado magazine, everybody was, and their mother was opening a cigar shop.
Yeah.
Everybody was in cigar rooms. So I thought, online cigar shop, that would make money. The other thing I thought was online gambling. And why did I think that? Because I had a computer where I could play solitaire all day. And I thought,
It would be so innovative.
Right? So I'm sitting there and I do these papers, but the online gambling, and this is when I lived in Maryland, I go to my grandmother and I'm like, I have a pretty good concept here. What do I do with it? You know what her answer was? Go to Atlantic City and talk to somebody. But this is 96. It's not like you just Google somebody. It's like that's literally you go drive and just start knocking on doors or going in a casino going.
And is that what you did?
No, I didn't do any of that.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know where to go. So when you're talking about having direction and know where to go, or somebody to lead you, what do you do with that? My grandmother was a businesswoman, so I asked her. She said, go to Atlantic City. I didn't do anything with it. What pops up for 3-4 years later and makes billions and billions and billions? Online gambling.
Yeah,
but that's all started with Chris, where I lived with Chris.
Right.
So then I was working for MBNA America, and I kind of hit the glass ceiling effect where MBNA started to kind of have a hiring freeze or a promotional freeze. And there was kind of writing on the wall, and there was a lot of rumors going around. It was Capital One going to purchase them, and who was going to get laid off, and who was going to do what.
Yeah.
And I had gotten used to a lot of promotions because I worked my ass off. So my grandmother taught me that you work as hard as you can, and you never take a minute of overtime, but you put in whatever hours are needed. And I did that for years. And then in multi-level marketing, right, that was the thing that like, so there was a company back then that was on the cover of the Fortune. They were #1 of the Fortune 500. And I met like some young go-getters that were saying the things that I loved hearing, being that an entrepreneur raised me. They're talking about all this entrepreneur, blah, blah, blah. So long story short is I quit cold turkey the company. I pull out my 401. I max out my cards. I buy in. I start doing all this stuff. This MLM was all about going to your warm market, friends like you, and saying, hey, join this thing. Come in, buy in with me, and you know, you'll be in my downline.
Right.
Or you go to the mall. Well, I hated both those things. And I thought to myself, why is and the other thing they would do is run ads in the newspaper. So this is roughly 98 at this point. So again, there's still not like a Craigslist or anything, but there is the formation back then of like, it was the fledgling kind of ZipRecruiters or the resume builders and those kind of sites where people could post. And I'm watching these people around me in this massively popular MLM going to the mall, hitting up their warm market and running ads. And I'm like, why is nobody just fishing on the internet? So I started fishing and it's working for me. And then I thought, hold on, let's simplify. and build basically a funnel, which today is what we call sales funnels. Back then, nobody had a clue about this stuff. So I was like, let me build a prospecting tool that's an online website that says, hey, if you're interested in this, click here, fill this out. It takes a minute, step by step. Long story short, I started to generate what was still is called a lead. And so we call these BizOp leads now. Now I don't do this business anymore, but so I went to my upline at a seminar. We had this big seminar in Denver. I go and I show him this concept and thinking he's gonna blow me off because he's the number 3 making $200,000 a month and who's this little 24-year-old putz that's telling me about it. He's like, I kind of dig that. Send me information. I don't hear from him for like 3 months, but I keep doing my thing and I start selling to my downline. Like, hey, instead of going and prospecting, use this, I'll sell you. So in doing so, he hits me up and says, tell me more about this. And he wants to buy from me. So now, long story short, I start making a lot more from selling the leads that I'm generating through my prospecting sales funnel than I was the MLM.
Interesting.
And then that guy says to me, from the number 3 guy in that company, do you think we could do this for mortgage leads? I'm like, let me look at my system and talk to my guy. What information do we need? Long story short, we switch over, start doing that. The next month we did $250,000 in sales.
Wow.
The next month we did $1 million. And that was in 1999.
So this is really trying to personalize what information people get and clarify who is eligible versus sending out the net, doing it long form and doing it linear and probably hitting 1 per 100 people that actually is interested.
These things are all, that sort of business is all about numbers game.
Yeah.
So the more you can throw against the wall, the more that will stick. So if you only throw 2 things against the wall, nothing might stick. If you throw 2 million against the wall, you might get to 2,000.
So this is where we are today then with the online ads and the digital marketing. And the problem gets to cost.
Of course.
Right? You need money to make money.
Yeah. So I mean, I got, and funny you mentioned cost. So when I started this, I was one of the pioneers in the online lead generation. And then there was the guys who actually did the marketing. So I was more of the brains of saying, let me create this for this client. I needed the guy that could do the actual marketing portion of it.
Right.
So for about 3 years, I captured roughly 80% of the profit. Gave 20% to the guy doing the marketing. But then somewhere around 2002, they figured it out. They figured out their value. And they started getting 80%, demanding 80%.
Wow.
And I would get 20. Now, there's still, again, there was your overhead was minimal, right?
Yeah.
'Cause it's all digital.
Well, and this is why we've had so many people make such an impact during this time frame where you have young people that have made money that well exceeds what you would expect at their age and experience.
Of course.
And it's causing a big shift in the workforce because now what you have are young people with fewer responsibilities, more money, coming from a different generation, and yet we're still saying you have to work your way up.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I mean, we saw this in government where I was dealing with a project, we were looking at human resources, and I said, you're going to have a really big topple problem. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, you've got people who are senior by age.
Right, yeah.
And so now they hold this senior rank, but the problem is there are people that are younger who have now the experience that is needed.
Right.
And these individuals, while their wisdom is useful, it covers maybe 10% of what we need to be doing to going into the future because we're changing so rapidly. It used to be the case that we changed every, say, 50 to 100 years. So that wisdom was still going, even though there would be some shifts by the younger generation, that wisdom was still really, really helpful.
Well, that 60-year-old doesn't know how to tweet.
Well, exactly. And so it doesn't even matter.
Don't get me wrong, the president does. But
well, but I mean, like there's... we were upstate a little bit in California, and there was a group there that is trying to do what we call close the research practice gap. What it means is that there are these research scientists who like deep dive into a problem, and then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, do you want to hear what it meant? Oh, you want lessons learned? Okay, well, under these very specific scenarios where we... And people go, that's not useful. Yeah. And so the practitioners, the people who need that information are saying, can you give me the top 5?
Right, yeah.
Wow. And what they're doing is helping bridge the gap between that which is using social media, which is using video, which is using all these things that traditionally we don't do as professors. It's needed at every echelon. And so this age change means we have people who need jobs at 65, 70 years old, who need skills that are no longer on their, they're not being taught.
Well, and unfortunately, typically that learning curve, when you've not experienced the growth of a new technology, is a massive learning curve. It's
well,
one thing if
for
you're
me to learn it. I mean, for me to learn tweeting, I'm still kind of like, okay, I guess that I need to put a
3-year-old that can do it all day long.
Yeah.
But you now try to show that 70-year-old what that's about, and it's like that learning curve and that gap is much more pronounced.
Yeah, it is. And I fear that what's going to happen, well, I don't fear, I know it's going to happen. We're going to have an even faster change.
Oh, yeah.
So
Do you ever watch those things that say, like, these things will, well, these things are going to be no longer part of life anymore. Things, well, I mean, like keys and, libraries and all these kind of things they're saying won't be part. But then they're also, I like reading those things that talk about what will no longer, like, what people born today will no longer ever know about or understand. Things like fax machines and this sort of thing. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
But that expedited process of that versus what used to be 50 or 100 years where something was kind of like, oh, that still makes sense. I mean, that's dropping tremendously.
It's dropping tremendously. So it used to be 50 years was just now 20, which is going to become 10, which is going to become 1 to 5. So number one thing in my mind that people can learn from you is this entrepreneurial mind. Which more than likely you come by honestly, and then your grandmother hit it up and improved it, right? And then your experience is added to it, but you're someone who's constantly at this forefront of thinking, right? So if we looked at our country and thought, how is this evolution going to continue? What's the next thing that's going to happen? Because it's not going to be people doing 9-to-5 jobs, right? So how do you see maybe some turnover occurring?
I mean, the one thing that, and I don't know if this is, the taking the temperature of the country, but I feel like in the people coming out of college, let's say, or the young mid-20s, I feel like there's less risk takers and there's more complacency and or entitlement. And to be an entrepreneur, what do you need? You need to be a risk taker. Right. You got to sack up.
Yeah.
Right? Because you might lose your ass. You're going to have to work harder hours. You can't be thinking that you're entitled because I got a degree that I'm just going to work my 8 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week, bitch about the fact that I wish our country switched to a 4-day work week and only working blah, blah. It's like you got to be able to know, you got to put in the elbow grease.
You got to be hungry, it sounds like.
Oh, you got to be crazy hungry.
We may not be hungry.
What?
We may not feel hungry.
That's what I'm saying.
As a nation,
well, I mean, if you feel you're already entitled to it, to the piece of the pie, and you don't have to earn it, why are you hungry? If you know you're going to get a trophy, regardless of how you actually placed, how hungry can you be? If you know that a spelling bee, everybody wins. But did they? In an entrepreneurial, that person knows that not everybody wins. Yeah. And the hungriest dog eats. Yeah. So you got to be the hungriest fucking dog. Excuse me. But you got to be the hungriest dog. Right, so that's the whole thing with being an entrepreneur. Again, I don't take away anybody who has a 9-to-5 job. I just haven't had one in 22 years, and I know that much like your trapeze, I have no safety net. Right. So if I'm not hungry and if I'm not cracking heads and working hours, and people always ask me, "Wow, you're working on your birthday," or "Wow, you're working during a holiday." Well, for us, holidays are our biggest sales. So I have to work. But I can take off any day I want, any time I want, do anything I want because I own my own business. Yeah. But that's a different mentality than somebody who's cool with their Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking to drive entrepreneurialism, you need risk takers that are hungry. I agree there's nothing wrong with it. My concern is that those jobs are not going to be as readily available. Well, I mean, there's a scary thing that talks about what the future will become is people's value will become basically what they are as a shopper. That's where digital marketing is headed. When you look at big data, because like what I used to be was, lead generation for things like insurance and mortgage and travel and general sale, dating and all that kind of stuff. But where you look at big data, they're talking about like people, because so much automation is going to take place and eliminate those kind of simple jobs. Right, they are. And nothing simple, so don't get me wrong. But what somebody will actually become is their value as a shopper, as a consumer. And then they'll get paid to search and or shop or they'll get credit. Like things are going to change into that kind of fashion, which is scary because you're looking at, well, how does the job market change when there's all the automation that's, and again, 50, 20, 10, 5.
Right.
Look at that with automation.
Right.
So that's a lot of job loss. And what
it's
happens?
A lot of job change. Right.
Change.
And so I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping people start to digest quickly.
Yeah.
There's not time
There's
for
no time
you to say, well, this
digest.
is the job I've had. I need
Right.
to keep it for another 30 years.
Right.
Dude, they ain't gonna be there.
You gotta be
so, and you sure as heck don't want to
Shit
teach
on
your
that.
kid that.
No.
So it's not just your kid's going to be in a different job than
Yeah.
you. It's not just that you're going to be in a different
Yeah.
job than you are. They're actually predicting now, Harvard's saying 3 to 6 careers,
Wow.
meaning you're going to constantly have to reskill in some capacity.
Reinvent yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this hunger and this passion for working really hard is
Yeah.
going to become really important if you want to eat.
Yeah. But I mean, that's so in today's world, I feel like, don't get me wrong, in my grandmother's day, there was a much more loyalty and longevity
Yes.
in a corporate kind of
Right.
position. But there's also people knew that you had to put in elbow grease regardless.
Right.
Like, again, what did my grandmother teach me? You work overtime without taking a penny for the pay. Let your performance and your desire show that you're the person for the next promotion. But that's not today's world. It's a little bit different. And so, if you have entitlement and or you have that loss of hunger or desire, or if you truly think that 9 to 5 gets the job done.
Well, I think it's changing from a time-based system to a performance-based system, which is actually true in
Which
learning
I
as
love.
well. My son plays music, and people always would say, "Oh, so where's he going to college?" And I said, at his level, you can't assume you're getting into any of the schools because it is talent-based.
You're right.
They don't care if you're a nice kid.
Right.
They don't care how many hours you put
Yeah.
in. I often refer to one of the swimmers that we have in our country who a lot of people complained that he didn't train as much as other people. And I kept saying, but he's won
Right.
a ton of gold
Right.
medals. He's doing something right.
Right.
The assumption that if you put in the time, you are owed a result
Right.
is not going to happen into the future.
But that's the entitlement.
Well, some of it's entitlement, some of it is an assumption that it's just an old school way of thinking that it is a time-based system.
Well, so that's tricky when you're an entrepreneur too, right? Because I tell people, because we have distributors around the world. We have
Right.
about 50 of them now. And they're all independent business owners, and they own, like they have the right, lease them the right to resell our trademark product.
Right.
But I don't ever know who's going to apply, and then I don't know their background, but these are the things I find out, but I tell them all the same thing. And I'll watch a lot of them get caught in that busy work mentality.
Yeah.
Just because you're putting hours in doesn't mean they're effective hours. So you have to be careful of just what you said, like, okay, well, I worked 14 hours today, but what did that 14 hours do for you? And I tell staff this all the time. I'd rather have you be efficient, effective, and productive than sitting around just milking the hours. Like if you're not, the old school, I remember this from when I worked at Burger King when I was 14. You got time to lean, you got time to clean. And it's true, right? So like you can burn hours all day long. And I got early on being an entrepreneur when I was telling you about those early resume sites.
Yeah.
I would spend 16 hours a day filling stuff out and doing things and all that. A lot of that was just to feel like I was working, but it wasn't achieving much. Now I can look back and say all that made me who I am, which is cool.
Yeah.
But people can also get caught in that, well, I worked hours, which means I did stuff.
Yeah.
But you can sit on your ass in a warehouse and pull a 9-hour day and not have moved off your chair.
That's right.
Sure, you were at work for 9 hours, but did you actually work for 9 hours?
Yeah.
And that's a big difference.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It sounds like we're going to have to work smarter, not harder.
Always. I mean, that's not a new concept, right?
No, but it's
No.
one that's going to be more of a necessity, where it
without a
used to
doubt.
be that some entrepreneurs and some people needed that, and now it's going to be everybody's going to need to have that mentality.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining
pleasure.
us.
Thank
This
you.
is awesome.